This deficit has nothing to do with the construction of the schools.
So you're saying none of this deficit
This is operational budget.
It's pure operational budget?
Yes.
And the question is, how is this allowed? I mean, I was at the mayoral debates where this became an issue. How is this allowed to go on for so long without any communication?
Again, I was informed of the deficit in December.
Okay. So you, just for the record, I'll let you go because I know you've got a schedule to maintain. But for the record, the mayor, we've all got it. You hear me, I sound like Kermit. For the record, and this is important to our viewers in Warwick, the City of Warwick executive branch, the mayoral branch, had no knowledge whatsoever of either the existence or the scale and scope of the operating budget deficit that existed in Warwick schools. Is that okay? Fair enough.
So, Mayor, what was going on in this private meeting today?
This meeting was about, they have a $9 million deficit. I want to create a budget commission to oversee the amortization plan because this has to be done over 4 or 5 years. It has to be approved by the Auditor General. I want to have confidence that can get done, so I want to, under existing state general laws, I want to appoint a budget committee that would oversee them, help them with this.
So who would be in this budget committee?
There'd be 3 appointments by me and 2 appointments, one by the superintendent of schools and one by the chairman of the school committee. I would look for financial and educational experts that can help them solve this problem. My appointments would be subject to the approval of the city council.
Yeah, so I guess, subject to the city council, but how far along are these conversations? Obviously,
Well, they have objected to it. It's all relatively new. I started doing this under the advice of my finance director, who's been involved in these commissions before. I talked to the Speaker of the House, I talked to the Auditor General, both of them thought it was a good course of action, a prudent course of action. The school department had a negative reaction to it initially. I've met with the city council, I've talked to the city council president, he asked me to come to this meeting today because this requires the city council to pass a resolution to send to the State House and they make the general law. So that's the path in. I can't do it on my own. So they wanted me to come and discuss it with the school department. Unfortunately, the initial draft, which was just taken from the existing general law as kind of a guideline, was sent to the State House, and somehow the state, it got to the Warwick Teachers Union, and they went to visit other elected officials, and it stirred up a lot of trouble for something that, as recently as last night, we were still redrafting. So I told them my concerns today. I'm firmly taking this path. There's a special council meeting next Wednesday night where the public will be allowed to speak and give their thoughts. And if the council approves it, it will go up to the State House, and then the House and the Senate has to approve it. So it still has a long way to go.
You mentioned that the school department has reservations against this. They declined to speak today. What are their reservations?
The initial draft was very draconian. I mean, it basically took control of the entire school department away from it. That was never my intention. This just focuses on this deficit, and they can't reduce a $9 million deficit overnight or even over a year or two. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 years. This committee will just oversee that amortization, and the committee will be dissolved as soon as the Auditor General approves of the amortization plan.
How was this meeting private?
It wasn't private. I mean, I meet 10 times a day. We don't invite people in. It's
Well,
just
we were told this was private.
I don't know who told you.
That was the city council president.
Well, I was here on his request, and I can't speak to what he told you. But I mean, it's private. I need to find it. It's meetings. We have meetings all the time. I meet with the school department, a lot of the people in that room on a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, anything?
Yeah, well, just to her point, the city council president actually had us, I wouldn't say physically removed, but clearly ushered us out of the room. So it was in fact private. And what would you say to taxpayer concerns that the membership of this meeting was constituted to narrowly avoid having to have an Open Meeting Act support? I mean, 4 city councilmen instead of 5. 5's a quorum, 5 you have to have an open meeting, 5 you have to publicize it, 5 we're allowed in. to record it. You put 4. There were, 1 or 2 school committee members. If there were more school committee members, then it would fall under Open Meeting Act. It seems like this meeting was handcrafted to avoid public scrutiny. What would you say to that?
I didn't craft the meeting. I was invited to the meeting. There were councilmen there. Under the law, it wasn't subject to open meetings. There'll be a very public meeting next Wednesday where residents are more than welcome to share their concerns.
Now,
As far as, for me, this is just a regular business meeting. That's what we do.
okay, city charter. There is a city charter.
Yes.
Doesn't something, the constitution of a committee like this, with this type of, I'll call it, in our opinion, extra legal power, constitute or require a change in the city charter?
You want to change the city charter so they can't?
No,
because
how do you?
They have 4 members. This was approved by their solicitor. He checked the law and he said it was legal to do it this way.
Okay, well, it won't be the first time in Rhode Island government where maybe
Oh, I'm sure.
that was an interpretation, but overall, I cover city council meetings, and when you talk about transferring power, financial power from one city branch, which is actually really a freestanding organization, which is the city school committee, to an appointee of the mayoral, an unelected appointee of the mayoral branch, that very often requires a change in the city charter. How do you walk past that?
This is a state general law. It supersedes the charter to create this commission.
Well, no, the state general law creates a commission that takes over the entire town. This is essentially, and
Right.
please correct.
We're amending that.
Yeah, well, correct me if I'm wrong. You're taking state law and you're sort of dropping it into a city environment. There's 2 issues with that. Number 1, the city charter. Number 2, the fear that statewide you'll have, cities and towns all over the place essentially subverting the elected, most often elected bodies called the city school committee. There is separate co-equal branches of government on the federal level. There's separate co-equal branches of government on the municipal level. Doesn't this violate that?
No, this is a fiscal emergency. It's a $9 million deficit.
But
We have to act to solve that deficit.
But respectfully, on 2 levels. Number 1, the city has known about this for years, this looming crisis, and many cities across the state are going over that. A fiscal emergency, as critically important as it is, and we understand the gravity of it, a fiscal emergency does not constitute an abrogation of a city charter or individual rights. There's all sorts of things that can be conflated into an emergency. Everything in cities are an emergency, Dave, and very often legitimately so, but you have an elected body called the school committee, I believe it's elected in the city of Warwick, who have statutory powers. There's a city charter that is designed to respect the difference between the 2. This seems to subvert that using powers potentially granted by the state legislature, which have no say, my understanding. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd be happy to talk to your city solicitor, but he didn't seem so inclined to speak, nor did your city council chair. How does the state impose a change on the city charter?
We're not changing the charter. The general laws supersede the charter. This is an emergency, and we haven't known about this for years. I was told about this deficit in December.
But anyone who attends city school meetings know that when you've got a city budget and you've got school construction plans, and again, I spend a great deal of time in other cities as well, you've got actually RIDE, for example, Rhode Island Department of Education, it creates and has, and I believe statutorily, correct me if I'm wrong, a committee that's required to be constituted in every city where the mayor works along with the school committee, and it's usually called a construction oversight or a construction committee or a finance committee. That exists under the Rhode Island Department of Education regulations, and that's to provide the flow of communication that would prevent this kind of cliff diving episode. Are you telling me that does not meet in the city of Warwick?
That's a building committee. This deficit has nothing to do with the construction of the schools.
So you're saying none of this deficit
This is operational budget.
It's pure operational budget?
Yes.
And the question is, how is this allowed? I was at the mayoral debates where this became an issue. How is this allowed to go on for so long without any communication?
Again, I was informed of the deficit in December.
Okay. So just for the record, I'll let you go because I know you've got a schedule to maintain. But for the record, the mayor, we've all got it. You hear me, I sound like Kermit. For the record, and this is important to our viewers in Warwick, the City of Warwick executive branch, the mayoral branch, had no knowledge whatsoever of either the existence or the scale and scope of the operating budget deficit that existed in Warwick schools. Is that okay? Fair enough.